this computer. Back to share screen. That was sharing screen. Let's see if it'll do it. Yep. There it is. Okay. So this is June 1st. And we're going to share the PowerPoint on listening. And we'll pick it up from the current slide, which is, excuse me, this is the processes of listening. Now we think about listening simply as you hear, you comprehend. This breaks it down into different types of listening and different types of, and going through the entire process, all the different steps. You listen for a lot of different reasons. You listen to music for one reason. How many people listen to music during or after a workout?
I do.
One. Okay. Okay, so good. So a couple. I'm sure there were more, but you're all probably all on mute. But that's so you're really not listening for enjoyment. You're listening to get yourself motivated. How many people listen to music in the car? And if you do, think about why you listen to it. Do you listen to it just to enjoy the music? Do you do it just to pass time? Do you do it just because you know you're trying to change your mood? How many people will hear a song and they'll change their mood?
I do.
Yeah.
Sad song, upbeat song, anthem, all can have different reactions. So this is all the way. And how many people go to concerts? Most of you?
Yeah.
I do.
Yep. You go there pretty much to be a passive listener. Maybe you sing along to the music. Maybe you I don't know, hop up and down. Maybe you do whatever people do at concerts. But frequently you're just sitting there. You're just sitting, laying back, or sitting back and listening to the music. So it's a very kind of a passive type of a listening experience. Now in class, it's sort of a little more active. You might be called on. You want to think along with it. You might be quizzed at any time. So you want to have a little more of a heightened sense of awareness. I would liken it to when a musician goes to a concert and he or she is thinking about how they would play the music themselves. You know, what are the chords? How's the guitarist? Is the guitarist good? Why is the guitarist good? What can the guitarist do that he can learn from or she can learn from? So that's much more like a classroom, or like if you're watching a tutorial and you're trying to figure out the steps of something. It's just a different type of listening. And obviously there's listening and conversation, or listening and conversation, whether or not it's just out with your friends, if it's meeting a new person, if it's a talk with a teacher or a boss at a job. So the process of listening, the way that they break it down is into 5 stages. You start out with receiving. Now receiving is just the basic, I hear the words or I hear the notes and I hear it. And then the second step is understanding. This is what they said. And evaluating will come in the third, but they're all so close together. These stages are so close together. There's remembering. In other words, I say to you, I say to you, we're having a midterm. We're having a midterm on Friday. So you're going to put that in your memory bank. Now, if you're evaluating what I said, what are you thinking about? You're thinking about, oh, okay, so there's a midterm. It's going to be a big grade on that one. I want to do well. Let's assume you want to do well. This probably means that we'll have a review. I want to make sure that I'm there for the review, and if I'm not there, I want to make sure that I see it on Blackboard before the test. And these are the chapters. I know that I've had to read 1, 2, 3, and 6, so I'll need to be up on those. And then we'll be talking in class tomorrow about a few other things having to do with interpersonal communication. So you'll want to make sure that you either attend that class and take notes, talk to a friend or whatever, but you probably all have a strategy for test taking, even though a lot of you probably don't think of it that way. But you probably have a strategy that says, I'm going to stay in the night before, I'm not going to stay, I'm going to get sleep, or I'm just going to wing it. Whatever it is, and if your strategy is to wing it and it doesn't work for you, you always get bad grades, then we know that your strategy is terrible, but you've still got a strategy. So this goes into the evaluation, and the strategy is part of the responding. All right. So this is somebody tells me that their neighbor died, or their mom died, or their grandmother died, and so you're evaluating it. You're like, oh, they feel sad, and so you respond by saying, I'm sorry for your loss, or I've got a midterm, I've got to study for it, and then your response is, I'm going to study on Friday night. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. So sometimes a response comes in conversation when it's expected, and other times it just comes. It might come later on, but in your head you've made that decision, and that's the response you've made. Even if you haven't said to me or to anyone around you, "Oh, I've got to prepare for that," you've thought it. So that you've got your 5 stages of listening. The way that might come across in again, in personal conversation might be, responding to the person who talks to you, but oftentimes it's just the response in your own head. Here's a model of just what I've just said. You hear the words right here. Let's say it's a conversation. Emily Gosselin, if you could unmute yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I say to you something along the lines, Emily, like, how are you today, Emily? Now, you've heard what I've said right there, right?
Yep.
So that's receiving. And what did I just say? What were the words?
How are you today?
And so you're deciphering my meaning. It means that I'm asking you how you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Simple. And I don't know why you'd want to recall that, other than to say later on, my teacher asked me the stupidest question in class. But you want to remember what was said. And then you're going to say to yourself, evaluating. So how would you evaluate that statement? It's a pretty banal statement.
You'd think about like what you did today and how you're feeling in the moment that you were asked.
Right. And you might say, I wonder why he asked me and not everybody else. He likes me more than all the other students. Or my name was, I was the image below his in the on the screen, on the Zoom screen. Or you ever have this happen, Emily? I know it probably never happened to you, but some student arrives to class and maybe their eyes are a little bit glazed, or maybe they just seem to. You ever have that person who walks in the room and you know that they're in the middle of something emotional and you don't know what it is, either super too excited or just, what's the word? Just so excited that or so sad that something's going on with them, even though they haven't said anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So if the teacher says, how are you doing in that case? We would think, well, that's a lot less banal, and it's a lot more of, why would the teacher ask somebody, if somebody walks in the class and they just are gloomy, and you know that there's something wrong in a gloomy standpoint, and the teacher said, how are you doing today, Emily? What would you think? What would the reason?
What would I think, like, as the person or as like the teacher asking?
As it's about the teacher asking, right? Just about the teacher asking. If you were to hear that, let's say Libby walked in and she had just a dark cloud over her and she was frowning and you didn't know why, and the teacher said, how are you doing today, Libby? Emily, what would you think?
She's like checking in on that person just because she's like giving off nonverbal cues that she's not doing all right. Like she wants to check up.
Yep. So that's concern. So you're evaluating and saying, oh, he's concerned. Or whatever the circumstances. It all depends on all the other factors around him. So that's the evaluation part. Why is he saying that? And this is done in an instant. And so if I say to you, we're going back to the more banal thing where I just say, how are you doing today, Emily? At this point, you want to give me a little feedback. So you'll probably say,
I'm good.
right. And what if you're not good? What if you're not good? What might you say?
Most likely would still say that I'm good.
Yeah. Which would be what? We'll get into this later on. Lying. It would be lying. It would be, the kind of white lie that we tell all the time. But, what if you said, and you probably have that person. You ever have that person where every time you say, how are you doing? They say, and they give you an answer and they give you a real answer. And and you don't necessarily need it. Like, because sometimes it's just them whining about something that everybody that everybody can whine about. And so but you want to respond. So you want to say, good. And I'll say, and then I would hear that. I would hear the words. I would understand what you meant. Fine. I would kind of put that in my memory bag for whenever I need it. And then I would also at the same time or right afterwards, I'd be evaluating it. Oh, she said fine, but she looks gloomy. There might still be something wrong. When you, and then of course I would respond, are you sure? Or I might respond, great. If I'm saying great and I think there's a problem with you, I'm responding because I've decided to just let it go and you don't want to talk about it. And if I follow up, it might mean that I think it's a good idea to probe at that point to make sure you're okay or whatever the reason is. And obviously, if you've got a student who comes into class and they're whatever, disheveled or like I said, eyeglassy or any of that stuff, the teacher is saying that. Why is the teacher saying that?
To like check in and.
I'm sorry, what's that?
To like check in and to like they're asking how they are. Right.
But why would they ask? If you had a student, let's say if you're the teacher and you had a student come in and they're let's say glassy-eyed, that's a good one. Why would the teacher say something to that student? Why would they say, are you okay?
Just because they are giving off, like, they don't look how they normally are, so there might be something wrong. So they see that something's wrong, so they want to ask, like, they want to point it out.
Right. And in this case, in the case of glassy eyes, I'm usually talking about what?
Like upset, like teary.
No, I mean more like under the influence of narcotics. How's that?
Okay, I wasn't sure. I didn't want that to be my first.
I know.
Answer.
But I mean, obviously that sometimes happens. I assume it happens in high school. Does it happen in high school?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's obviously it's not a good way to study. But so if a teacher says that to a student in high school because they suspect they're again under the use of under the influence of narcotics, why is the teacher saying that to them? Because they truly care about how they are, or because they just want to call attention to the fact that we understand what's going on?
Just to like call attention to the fact that they know that something's up.
Because am I correct to say that sometimes when a student comes to class like that, they think that nobody notices?
I mean, I don't know personally, but probably not.
Okay. It's, it happens. And again, it's sort of that response. So the idea of listening is you're listening not just to hear the vibration, not just to understand what they're saying, but also to interpret what they're saying and then build on it for future conversation or for whatever the next step is. And sometimes you remember only as long as the conversation lasts, and sometimes you remember, for the rest of your life, depending on what you're talking about. Now, Libby, you're a good listener. Am I right about this?
Yeah.
All right. So do you find it easier to listen to some people than to listen to other people?
Yeah.
If somebody was excited about winning the lottery and they were telling you about winning the lottery, would it be easier to listen to that person, or would it be easier to listen to somebody who had just lost their grandmother and was sad about it?
Probably someone who just lost their grandmother, because I can relate to that.
Because you can relate to it?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you said? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's different for everybody. I think the thing about the person who wins all the money is that it's, I think we would put ourselves in that situation, would be excited. It's something that doesn't happen every day. On the other hand, somebody who lost somebody, it's empathy. Some people are more empathetic than others. And so some people are more comfortable in one situation than with another. Is listening attentively difficult if you've got that friend who's always got a problem and they've got another problem?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It can be hard to listen attentively. And what if, let's say this, let's say you've got nothing huge, but let's say it's finals week. And do you have finals week in high school?
Yeah.
Okay. When's finals week for you guys?
Like the week before the last week of school, usually.
So June 10 to June 17?
Yeah.
Or is it June 3 to June 10?
I don't really know. Just depends.
Okay, so the end of June. Okay, so let's say it's finals week, and the way they do it in college is your classes go to a certain point, and then you have no more classes, and then everyone's working on papers, and they're working on tests, and they're really important for your grade. So students kind of bury themselves in studies for that week. So let's say it's finals week, and let's say somebody's got a problem with their boyfriend or something like that. And now what you've got on your mind is you've got grades on your mind, and you've got the finals on your mind, and you've got the study on your mind. And it's not hugely, I mean, it is important, but it's like that everyday crisis, everyday emergency. And then somebody comes along and they've broken up with their boyfriend or they've broken up with their girlfriend or something, and they want to tell you about it. Is it easier for you or more difficult for you to listen attentively to that person, knowing that you've got study to do?
Definitely more difficult.
Okay. Did I set that up did I steer you too much on that question? It'd be more difficult. Why?
Because my mind would be like a monkey mind. Like I'd have so much going on and I couldn't focus on one issue when I have other issues going on.
And a lot of people have that. That's, again, it's a form of noise. Just like talking to somebody in a loud place is noise. The same way, if you've got things going on in your life, then it can be noise that keeps you from listening attentively. Good. Sophia, viewpoints for remembering names. I don't know why, but it's a lot easier to remember where somebody works or where they're from than to remember their name, statistically. Studies have shown. Do you find that's true with you?
Yeah.
Okay. How would you, there are tricks to learning names. Have you heard about this, mnemonic devices?
No.
Let's say you met somebody named Libby. What would be a mnemonic device? Is like something you think of that you associate with that person, and it helps you remember their name. So you had to remember Libby's name. You just met Libby and you wanted to remember her name. What mnemonic device might you use?
Well, I met her in like my history class, so I just like associate.
Sorry, a little bit louder, Sophia.
I'd associate her with like my history class because that's like where I met her.
Okay, so how would history remind you of Libby Powell? All right. Let's say Jimmy K. How would you remember Libby Powell if you were to just meet somebody named Libby Powell?
So when I meet people, I like to try to use like let's say something I'm trying to work on is initials. So I might go like LP or like EP.
Okay.
And then that kind of like helps me remember it. Like if I remember like, oh crap, what's that person's name again?
That's not bad. Now LP in the old days, it was an album. That was another word for an album, was LP, which was long playing record. I don't think they have those anymore except for throwback music collectors. And so you just remember EP, but you don't, or LP, but you don't have anything to link it to?
I don't know. It kind of just like falls into place. I don't know.
It does it work for you?
It works for me.
Okay. So basically you remember the initials and that helps you remember the name.
Yeah, it kind of just fills in the rest. I don't know. It's weird.
Okay. You think, Libby, when people remember or when people meet you, do you think anybody associates you with canned vegetables?
Me?
No, Libby.
I don't know, maybe. Like I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
like people who like have their own houses and stuff. But
they buy groceries, so they think of it?
yeah.
Okay. Are most people good about remembering your name?
Yeah, because it's a little like different. You don't really get it a lot.
Yeah, Libby's easy. It's funny. Libby is a lot more easy to remember than Elizabeth, I think.
Yeah.
Elizabeth is one of those really old names that's kind of made a comeback in recent years.
Yeah.
Sarah's like that. There was a period where there weren't that many Sarahs, and now Sarah's making a comeback. But yeah, Libby Powell. I think, the demonic names people would say. Are you an athlete?
Yeah.
Are you strong?
I'd say I'm kind of strong.
Okay. And so you might think if with somebody who's an athlete named Powell, you would think Powell.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's another one. But some of these names like only make sense to that person. Like they'll associate you with a color, who knows why. Sometimes they associate you with a person. Like if I have my mother's middle name is Elizabeth, so I might do that. Is remembering names? Let me pick somebody else's. I didn't get a list of everybody when we started, so I'm kind of limited to Sophia, Elizabeth, Emily, and Jimmy. Let me do this. Let me switch so I can see everybody. Remembering student names, is that a big deal, Natalie? Is a teacher going to get more out of you, and are you going to enjoy a class more if you think the teacher knows who you are?
Yeah, probably.
They've done studies, and they've even done a thing where they've done name tags. They've folded, not name tags, but folded name placards, or they put people's names and they fold it on the paper, they put it in front of them, like like they would on a panel show. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. And they find that students are actually more comfortable and they feel better about the class if a teacher teaches like that, even though the teacher obviously doesn't know their name, they're just reading it off the plaque. Than if the teacher doesn't know their names, doesn't use their names. Do you guys feel that would work for you, or would you know, oh, he's just reading my name? Like right now, I could say, Meg, what do you think about that? But the question is, do I actually remember Meg, or am I just reading her name? Meg, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I guess like if a teacher, I don't really know what you're asking me.
Okay. Well, if let's say this, I can remember some of your names, but Nayeli's, I have no idea how to pronounce her name. So very likely, I'd say 50% of the time, when I ask her a question, I turn to her and I say, Nayelis, even though we've gone over it. What have we gone over it about 75% of the classes, Nayelis?
Yeah.
Yeah. But so we know that I don't know how to pronounce your name. I'm just reading it off the bottom of the screen. You know how you can look at the screen, you can see all the names, and my first name is David because of that. You'd never remember that. You'd see me in the hallway, or you'd see me wherever, and you'd say, "Hey, Mister." I get that. I get, "Hey, Professor." Sometimes I get that "Hey" from former students, and I know they don't remember my name, and they just can't think of anything to say. But if I called you, if I call on you by name, obviously we don't have much choice in Zoom, but do you feel better about it if a teacher knows your name or they don't know your name? And if they were just reading it from a name tag or reading it from something in front, a placard in front of your desk, would you still feel better about that than you would if they just said, "Hey, you"?
Well, I think like attaching a name to like a question or anything is or how they're addressing you kind of makes you more engaged. And I think the name tags are just there to like help the teacher in the beginning to remember the names.
Yeah.
And over time they'll learn them.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
What about, let's say, you guys start class, September, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you have the same teacher for the same subject all year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, some of the classes, yeah.
Okay, so am I correct to say that it takes the teacher about a month or a month and a half to learn everybody's name? Or do they learn it within a few weeks?
It depends on the teacher, I think, and it also depends on the type of kids you have in your class, because if you have like kids that participate a lot,
yeah,
I feel like you're more likely to remember their names. But if you have a kid that doesn't really participate in the class, you wouldn't you maybe wouldn't learn their name as fast.
Okay. Like, would you say if you had Angel in your class, you wouldn't really remember him, but you'd remember like just the top of his head?
I don't know.
All right. Good answer. And sorry about that, Angel. That was just mean of me. I apologize. I'm going to go back to the listening barriers. I have to get rid of this. How do we get rid of this? Oh. Hold on. All right. Here we go. Listening barriers. Distractions. We talked about one, which is the mental distraction of having something you've got to get done, studying for midterm, studying for finals. We're talking about physical distractions, like maybe there's a man setting himself. That's pretty extreme. Let's say if you've got a person who is throwing a brick through a storefront window, and your friend is talking to you about their breakup or their big opportunity or something, but you can look over their shoulder and see. That's another one. So that's a physical distraction, and there's also a mental distraction. If you just lost a loved one, which just happened to my neighbor, it's got to be difficult when people talk to you about things. You're trying to listen, but a lot of times you're not listening. Biases and prejudices. We talked a lot about this in the culture chapter. But a lot of times you probably have a bias, or if you do have a bias and you don't maybe even realize it, you might think to yourself, oh, they just, you might listen to a person in a certain way, but not in another way. Or you might, when you're interpreting what they say, you might interpret it in one way or a different way. For example, you ever talk to somebody and let's say Heismer, you ever talk to somebody and you thought, well, they're not listening to me because they think I'm just a kid?
Yeah, several times.
Yeah, and it's a bias, and in many cases, and again, we talk about certain things like certain subjects, and technology is the big one. I mean, technology is one where oftentimes, if you're teaching computer science in college, you've absolutely got to keep up on all of the different trends in your industry, because you're likely to have some 17-year-old kid who knows twice as much as you. But biases, prejudices, let's say women, oh, a girl can't possibly know this. That's one of the worst. Any of you girls ever run into that, where you just felt like the person just wasn't giving you credit simply because of your gender?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's horrible. And so you want to make sure that it doesn't affect you. And when you talk to people, you might be making a mental note of, he or she is not taking me seriously for whatever the reason is. And you might have to think about how you can overcome that. Obviously, racist, heterosexist, ageist, sexist, that all goes under biases and prejudices. Sometimes it's lack of appropriate focus. Your mind is wandering in class and the teacher says something interesting. Your friend is, you're with 4 people in a car, and your friend says something you probably should focus on more, but the distraction and just maybe your mind is wandering without a real distraction, and you're just not focusing enough on it. And then there's also something called premature judgment. A lot of times this comes out as you start to explain something, and then somebody jumps ahead to the end and they've solved your problem for you. Yeah, anybody ever run into that? No?
Yeah.
You have, okay. And it's sort of like you're explaining something complicated, but they just want to get to the end. And so they judge it halfway through, and you don't get to explain your whole situation to them. You run into that, I'm sure?
Yeah.
Okay, so you want to make sure that it doesn't happen with you. And at the same time, with premature judgment, a lot of times it's about how you listen and understanding how you listen. Like if you're a time-focused person, if you're a results-focused person, if you're a relationship focused person, you're going to listen to people in different ways. And so you want to kind of identify the way you listen and understand how you listen. And then you can modify the way you listen, either to become a little more patient or possibly to figure out a way to get to where you want to go and help the person who's speaking to you explain things more effectively to you. Sometimes that's asking questions. Sometimes that's paraphrasing, interrupting the person and paraphrasing. But you really want to think about how you listen, and you want to be able to either fix what you can and modify what you can't. And if you are talking to other people, you want to be aware of these things to keep them from being a good listener. Cell conversations. How many people have had an occasion? Angel, this is a good one for you. You ever been in a bookstore or some other kind of a store and somebody comes in and they're chatting on their cell phone and they are just almost like they're not even aware there are other people around? Yes. Yeah, I think we all have. We probably, some of us have been in that person who's had the cell. How many people will bring a cell phone into the supermarket with them or into any store? Yeah, couple honest people.
Yeah.
We can't help ourselves. You know, there's this theory about place that I think I might have talked about before, which is that where you are can be determined by a lot of factors. For example, right now you're at your homes, you're in class, you're on the computer. So how many places are you in right now? You're in 3 different places. The same way, when you are in your driveway and you make a call to somebody at work about something going on at work, you're on the phone, you're in the driveway, and you might be considering yourself at work. So there's a thing with cell conversations where people, again, they encroach on your life by having their conversations, or you're encroaching on theirs. How many people try and keep their conversations short when they're on a cell phone? Some, not all.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just something to be kind of aware of. How many people listen to cell phones? How many people listen to other people's conversations if they're in a public place talking?
Sometimes.
I do.
Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
It's hard not to, though.
It is hard
Yeah.
not to. And you know
Especially if
something,
they're talking
honestly,
loud.
if somebody has a conversation on a cell phone in a public place, they should be aware that just like if that people are going to listen. You know, they're encroaching and they're trespassing on in your area. Why wouldn't you be able to listen to them? So sometimes you can pick up some interesting things. I remember years ago, I was a little bit bored and somebody was talking in a loud enough voice in a bookstore, and I just followed them around and I wrote notes about the conversation. And I was going to use it for something fictional. I never did. I mean, it was just an exercise, basically. But I was amazed by how, the guy didn't care. He just didn't care if anybody heard his side of the conversation, and he didn't care about being quiet so the rest of us could enjoy the bookstore. So anyway, so that's something we have to be aware of. And again, if you're having a private conversation, you want to keep it private, don't walk into a public place. Whoops, let's see. Effective listening. So empathetic, you know what empathy is? Understanding what people are saying and feeling and being accepting and sympathetic to what they're saying. And objective listening, which is to go in without biases and just listen to what they're saying without bringing too much, I don't know how many of you were in that situation where you talk to somebody and they want to interrupt you to tell you what your problem is and how to fix it, or at least tell you how to fix your problem. They say that's a big gender thing. Again, I don't want to get too into. I don't want to lock ourselves into all men do this and all women do this, but men statistically as a group are more likely to want to solve your problem, and women more often as a group want men to just listen to their problems, and they want their friends to listen and sympathize. They don't necessarily want them to solve them, which will drive men crazy because they'll feel like, well, your problems are so easy to solve. I don't know if anybody else, Heismer, you ever feel like that?
Like sometimes, not always.
Yeah, it's something you've got to learn. Again, it's one of those things you want to work on if you're a male, and you want to have understanding with if you're a female. And you know, what's the problem if you just agree with somebody all the time, no matter what they say? You might be enabling bad habits. I don't know if any of you have had that situation where you've got the friend and they're always complaining about their relationship or their boyfriend or their girlfriend, and they go on, and in the back of your head, you're thinking you should just, break up with them, or you might think the problem isn't with them, it's with you. And you don't say it because you want to be polite. Anybody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where you kind of run you want to be a good listener, but there's always that question of, at some point, is somebody being better off? And I remember this happening when I was a teenager, which was years and years and years ago. But you would have usually it was the girl, in my experience, who was being cheated on by the boy, and excuse me, and everybody knew it but them. And at a certain point, and the question was, the moral dilemma that I remember we were put into, or I was put into, is, do you tell your female friend that her boyfriend is cheating on her?
You can tell them, but they probably won't believe you.
That's the double-edged, yes, the two-pronged problem with that is, one is you're violating, the code of not interrupting or not getting involved in someone's business. And then number two is they might not listen to you, and then you just become the bad guy. Even if they break up, it's like, oh, we broke up because of him, or they don't break up, and that's even worse because now they hate you. So it's definitely an issue with listening is, do you listen non-judgmentally? And are you, now when they say critical listening, they don't mean critical like criticize. Although obviously if I say to you, Libby, I think your work's been really great in this class, that's criticism, although it's not negative criticism, but it's still criticism. Or if I say, you did really well on that last essay, I would just work on this. That's fairly mild criticism, but it's constructive criticism. So you want to be sure that when you hear the words critical listening and criticism, you realize that there is a positive aspect to critical, although many of us just say it's not. They just think of critical as in criticize. So to be an effective listener, you want to listen objectively, you want to listen with empathy, you want to be non-judgmental, but at the same time, you want to be critical. So they're doing this for this reason, we try to understand them, and we're not going to judge. And then also there's surface listening and depth listening. Who wants to take a whack at that? Depth listening is obviously we're listening in greater depth. Well, you know something, versus that, I'll just tell you what it is. Surface listening is I'm only hearing what you're saying, and I'm just doing it till I get the chance to talk. And depth listening is really getting into what you're saying to me. We'll skip negative empathy. And we'll go to styles of effective listening. To be polite is better than to be impolite. Active listening is the thing you really want to learn. There's a technique to it. If you go into business and you go into management, and this can also include not working for nonprofits, there are certain techniques you use. One is when you're listening to somebody, you want to give them feedback. You want to show understanding. Now, this is a little bit different from empathy, and in that you just want to show that you understand what they're saying. In some cases, as a manager, you're going to have an issue with an employee, or as an employee, you're going to have an issue with a manager. And it's going to be really important for you to master this technique of active listening. We'll work on it more tomorrow. But active listening is you want to ask people questions, you want to draw them out, you want to paraphrase what they say. Do you know what paraphrasing is?
Yeah.
Okay. What's paraphrasing?
It's like taking, it's almost like a summary. It's like taking what you like received and what you learned and then kind of putting it in a shorter version, like in your own words, like getting the main points and like rephrasing what the other person said.
All right, then. So what you're saying then is that paraphrasing is repeating it back to the person in your own words so that you understand it, and also so that they can hear what they're saying and they can say, yes, that's what I mean, or they can say, no, I don't mean this. I mean, there's a nuanced part of it that you don't understand that I'm saying to you.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. Courtney, does that make sense to you? Okay. So you want to question people. And if I'm questioning you, let's say, for example, Court, you're talking about your anxiety about the coronavirus, the COVID-19, and you say, I'm just so upset and I'm not sleeping. So then my question to you might be, oh, you're not sleeping. Why aren't you sleeping? Are you sleeping because are you not sleeping because you're upset?
I mean, yeah, well, like the anxiety.
It's anxiety? Okay, so you're anxious because you're not sleeping?
Oh, sorry. I thought you, well, no, you're not sleeping because you're anxious because of the coronavirus.
Do you think maybe you're just not sleeping because you don't have to be up and time is less of without a schedule? Do you think maybe you're not sleeping just because there's no schedule? And so you don't have to go to bed anymore and you don't have to get up until noon for class?
I mean, me personally, yeah.
Okay.
I'm a little confused by the question.
What's that?
I'm a little confused by the question.
Well, if I say that if I'm anxious and I'm not sleeping, right?
Yeah.
That's two different things, correct?
Yeah.
But they could be connected and they could not be connected. So asking questions and paraphrasing helps you figure out, well, are you anxious? Are you anxious and that's why you're not, are they linked or are they not linked? Can they not be linked?
Yeah, they could not be linked.
Okay. So if I wanted to find out exactly what it is, and again, by the way, are you anxious and not sleeping?
No, I sleep pretty good.
Okay, let's say this. We'll say the fictional Courtney's not sleeping.
Yeah.
And she's anxious. Are you anxious?
Not about the virus.
See, that's something else. Some people are anxious, and there's no need for you guys to respond to this, but some of you are probably anxious about the virus. Some of you are probably being made anxious by family members who are anxious about the virus, so it kind of rubs off on you. And some of you are probably anxious about just because you're stir crazy, because you're stuck in the house and you're wondering when it's going to end. And then others of you are probably anxious because of money, because hopefully none of you are in this situation, but I know a lot of adults where they've lost their income and maybe they've lost their industry and they can't, they're not sure if they're going to be able to make rent with beyond 4 months, 5 months. Other people are just anxious and nervous because they don't know what they want to get on with their lives. My college students, I had a lot of college students who were on scholarship at UMass Lowell, and those students, they trained all season. They trained all season, and then the lacrosse season comes in and the baseball season comes in, and they lost their season. And they're scholarship athletes, and that's why they're there. And so then the question is, well, what are they going to do? They've got an extra year. Are you going to stay in school? Are you going to finish up? Are you going to go to grad school? So it really creates a I mean, this COVID-19 situation has created a lot of anxiety for a lot of different reasons. For one person, it's the uncertainty of the virus itself. For other people, it's the finance. For other people, it's just putting their lives on hold. I know some of you graduated, and I know they did some sort of a graduation ceremony in Haverhill on HTV. Is that what it's called? HCTV? Nobody. Okay. Anyway, they did something for graduation. I know in Beverly, there was somebody on my street, and they had a big line of cars coming by, and they were all decorated, and they were all beeping their horns for this woman who had graduated, or girl who had graduated, and she was getting her picture taken in her cap and gown outside of her house, but there was no ceremony. There was, how many people feel like they're missing out on a part of their life that they're never going to get back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you all are. I think the other thing is you're all going to have something. You're having students right now are having a shared experience with just about everybody across the country. So when you're in college in 2 and 3 years and you're meeting people, you can always look back and you can say, you remember 2020 with the COVID-19 situation? And you can all agree it was awful. But everything that comes out of this situation, it's going to be a shared experience for people your age, really for the rest of your lives. So for better and worse, it's an experience that other high school juniors have not had to deal with, other high school seniors have not had to deal with. And again, for good or bad, it's something that you guys will always remember. And when you meet people, it'll always be a talking point that you can use to relate to other people. Anyway, that's about the COVID situation. But in terms of paraphrasing and questioning, you want to find out a little bit more about it. You know, are you nervous? Because, by the way, Court, why are you anxious?
Like you said, like the stir crazy thing and like wanting to get back to normal life.
And I'm guessing for most people in your age group, that's exactly what's going on. That would be why you'd be anxious. And then for older people, it's probably a lot of it's money. And then obviously, if you've lost, I mean, we're still losing. I think we lost 74 people on Friday, which, you know, if that's your person, you know, your grandmother or something like that, that's another reason to be anxious or concerned, or if you've got elderly grandparents. So it's all these different reasons. And so by using these techniques, questioning and paraphrasing, so the reason you're nervous or the reason you're anxious is because you're stir crazy. That's a way to getting at, you know, kind of breaking it down so that I completely understand what you're saying. Have you ever had a situation where somebody's had a conversation with you and you thought you understood it, and then you thought about it later and you thought, oh, maybe this is what they're saying, but maybe they're saying something else?
Yeah.
That basically being an active listener does two things. It helps you understand what the person means and really understand it. And it helps the person to feel heard. Have you ever had a conversation where you've told somebody whatever, and then you walked away thinking they don't understand? They weren't listening. You should have. It should have been something you've all had. And so being paraphrasing and asking questions will help you to understand more. Now, that's two of the techniques of active listening. You also want to show empathy. You want to show understanding. Now, sometimes it's empathy and sometimes it's understanding. Somebody lost their mother. Somebody had something horrible happen in their lives, and you're going to be empathetic. But if you're a supervisor, we'll stay with you, Courtney, but you're a supervisor and somebody is working for you who was one of your friends, and they're showing up late for work, and now your boss says you've got to talk to them. Obviously, that can be a really tough conversation. So when you want to talk to them, you want to show, and you say, why do you keep, let's say it's Heismer. Not that it would ever be Heismer. Heismer would always come in early, probably 15 minutes at the beginning, early. But let's say we had the bad Heismer, the mirror image of Heismer, like the loci to his Thor. Let's say he comes in and you're saying, so you're using these techniques of active listening, and you're saying, so what you're saying is, or you say to him, so you're coming in late, and why do you keep coming in late for work? It's causing problems. And he says, I'm really sorry. My mother's really sick. she's got cancer. At that point, you can show understanding and sympathy. But if he says, yeah, but so what if I'm late? Angel's always late. Then you've got a situation on your hands, because Angel, and again, we're talking about the bad angel, Satan, not the good angel who we have here in class, but the bad angel. One thing has nothing to do with the other, but it's a fairly common thing when you have a problem with employees, is somebody says, well, this person's behavior is influencing my behavior. And so you can say at that point, so you think because Angel gets away with it, you can get away with it. And then as a supervisor, so you're understanding what they're saying. So what you're saying is, because his behavior influences your behavior. And then you've got to say, as a manager or as a supervisor, you might want to say, well, we're really not talking about Angel here. That's a separate situation that we'll talk with Angel about. But let's talk about you, Heismer. So you've expressed understanding, but not necessarily empathy. Do you understand how we're splitting hairs on that one? We're differentiating. And that's a real life important thing that you're going to want to know. Also, when you talk to people, and I think you're really good at this, but you give people feedback. Like I'm talking to you and I see your head nodding and I see that your face is open and your hands are away from your face and your body language is fairly open.
My dog is crying, so I'm going to let him out.
Speaking of distractions, Barry is good listening.
I was trying, you can go on. I needed to.
Well, I was going to say you were smiling, and I was thinking it's interesting that you're smiling like that when we're talking about what a terrible employee the bad Heismer is.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you want to basically, you want to give people nonverbal feedback. So if you're talking to Heismer, and you probably are going to run into this at some point, you're going to have the job interview where the person just is deadpan and tortures you like that because they're not giving you any response. So you want to give people response. All right. So you're paraphrasing what they're saying. You're questioning what they're saying. You're showing that you understand where they're coming from. Maybe you show empathy, maybe you don't, but you understand where they're coming from. So you're showing understanding, and you're giving them nonverbal feedback, which is nodding, things like that. And then finally, the fifth step is there's got to be an action step for the future, which is in the case of the supervisor and the employee, you might tell the bad Heismer, well, listen, we've got to work on this. We've got to work on this. What's a good way for you to work on it? What if you just try to get here early for the next week and we'll keep an eye on it. We'll see how it goes. And they say, okay. And then so you feed forward and you say, all right, we'll talk about this again in a week. We'll work on it this way, and then we'll try again in a week. How does that sound? Is that good? Now, this is what you're saying to Heismer, but also does that make sense to you in this situation?
Yeah.
So you're identifying you've identified the reasons at the beginning. That's you talking, and then you've paraphrased their response. You've asked questions about what's going on. You've shown understanding. You've given them good feedback with your nonverbals and the questions you've asked. You've shown that you're listening to them. They feel it. They've heard. So you're really understanding the situation. And then, of course, at the end, you feed forward, which is you kind of provide the next step. You've given a next step option to Heismer, which is in this case, let's work on being 15 minutes early. We'll track it for the next week. We'll see how it goes. And that's that. In another circumstance, it might be a different solution. Let's talk in a week. Let's talk in a month. You've got, if somebody comes to you and they've got a proposal for something, and after using these techniques, you say, well, let me bring it to my board. Let me bring it to my board of directors, Angel, Libby, and Heismer, and we'll see what they think. And I'll get back to you in whatever time. It's a different solution because it's a different scenario, but you're using the same techniques. Does this make sense to one and all? Good, we can move on. When you're talking about culture, gender, and listening, obviously with culture, if you've got somebody from another culture, you have to make sure that the language matches up, and also not just their ability to speak the language, but also the slang within the language. Do we have anybody who's a second language, a dual language, English as second language student in the class? We don't, but I assume you all know people. So sometimes you'll say a phrase and it just doesn't translate the same in Spanish as it does to English. You want to be aware of that. Same way, sometimes it's just a regionalism. Somebody from the South says something. I can't think of a good example at this second, but it just means something a little bit different when you hear it up north, or compared to what we're used to. People in New York and Boston, they like to speak fast. People in other parts of the country, they speak a little more slowly. So when they talk about language and speech, it's not just the interpretation, but it's also the understanding, even within languages that are the same. Non-verbal behaviors might be a little bit different. People from Europe, as a general rule, they will get close to you in an argument, but they're not going to hit you. If somebody in America gets close to you, there's probably you want to get ready, because generally once you invade social space in America, there's a good likelihood that a push or a punch or a slap is going to come quickly afterwards. And feedback for cultural and gender listening. And by the way, for culture and gender, the other thing is they say that in large numbers, women tend to be better listeners and they tend to show more understanding, but they're not as assertive and they don't always come across non-verbally as confident as men do. So these are things to be aware of, both as a listener and as a speaker, that unfortunately there are these gender stereotypes, and you want to make sure you don't fall into them as either a listener or as a speaker. And again, if one of the things I tell women in my public speaking and my professional communication class is, you have to, when you speak to a room, you have to own that room, because everybody wants to take it away from you. And you want to make sure that they don't shortchange you for your intelligence and your abilities. Finally, there's feedback, like I said, and when you're talking to people, especially if they're in a different culture and you're having a little bit of trouble understanding them, take the extra time and make sure that you give them feedback. Make sure you give them a good understanding that this is what I understand you're saying, just so that if it's not right, they can flag you and say, no, 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 this is what I mean. Rapport and report talk, same basic deal. Listening cues, we talked about it. And the purpose is the amount of listening you do and the purpose of the listening you do. You want to be aware of that. That's actually across the board. You always want to be aware of why you're listening to somebody. Sometimes you listen because they're a friend. Sometimes you listen because you're stuck because it's class. You've got to do it. Sometimes you might see somebody and it's an authority figure and you feel like you've got to listen to that person. You want to always be aware of what it is. And there are a lot more subtle reasons than that. And, you know, you listen to somebody because they're a friend of a friend of a friend, something like that. What are they trying to tell you? What are they trying to tell you? Should you listen to it? Should you not listen to it? Should you believe it? Should you not believe it? How much weight should you give it? All of those things. And that's it. We good? That's chapter 6. You'll have a quiz on that. I'll post it tonight. And thanks very much. That's all for class. Uh-oh. Hold on. Boom. That's it for today. Any questions about what we just covered?
No.
Okay, good. I'm trying to get this to a full screen, and I don't think it's cooperating today. I don't know why, but all right. So that's chapter 6. We good on that?
Yeah.
Good. I'll talk a little bit tomorrow on a few other things. I'll basically borrow from my professional communications class and bring a few things in. Did I talk to you guys before about ACE? Analyze, compose, and evaluate. I'll talk about that tomorrow. But that basically just says that when you are communicating with people, here are some strategies and here are some things to think about And it's professionally, it's especially in the professional environment, but they can be valuable ideas and tools for for any kind of interpersonal communication. So good, good, good. We'll talk tomorrow. Is that good? Any questions?
No.
Great.
no.
I'll see you tomorrow. Oh, well, let me take attendance. I'm sorry. I knew there was something else, and I knew if I stayed on long enough, I'd understand. When I say your name, you can sign off. We'll start with Courtney Howell.
Yeah.
Very good. Sophia Caruso. Good. Also, if you, Meg Dalia, if you have not done your assignment, it is going to be floating on the discussion board until tonight, I think at 11:59. So make sure you get that in. Did you find it interesting, by the way?
Yeah.
Good.
Mhm.
We'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow. But yeah, good. And was it clear, by the way, that I wanted one paragraph from each person? I know it wasn't in all cases, but however you turn it into me, I'll take it. But I would, if you haven't done it yet, then I would like it one per person. Hopefully everybody's already done it, but we'll also talk about the quiz tomorrow as well. So Jimmy K, I've got you.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you tomorrow. Tommy, I got you. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. See you tomorrow.
Allison,
Here.
very good. See you tomorrow. Alice,
Thank you. Here.
see you tomorrow. Heismer, see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you. Angel, see you tomorrow. Cole, see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Nave. Jada Lee.
Here.
Nielis. Madison. And, oh, Emily, why don't you hold on for just a second? Libby,
Here.
thank you. Nielis, I have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Natalie, I have you. Madison, I have you. See you tomorrow.
I just wanted to say one thing. I have
Okay.
work on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Like
Okay. Well, on Friday, it won't be a big issue.
Okay.
Thursday is going to be the review. I you know, watch it and do the best you can on Thursday. Watch it Thursday night, do the best you can. I will have the midterm up for a while, so you'll have plenty of time to take the midterm,
Okay.
but it's always good to see the review. Wednesday will probably be a quiz, so just kind of pay attention and make sure you tune in, or make sure you pay attention, and we'll cover more tomorrow.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, good. Thanks, Madison.
Emily Cruz was here also, but she texted me and said that she got kicked out.
Oh, okay. Tell her if she ever gets kicked out, just go through the process to get back in,
Okay.
because that's that usually works. I get kicked out. I've been kicked out probably 5 times since March, since the middle of March when we went on. So good.
All right.
Emily, hold on just a second. I want to talk to you, and I gotta make sure we're not recording. This is awful. This is awful. Hold on. Remind me later. Okay. Oh, good.